In July 1961, at the edge of this pool, 3 people met to set the British Empire on fire: a government minister, a spy, and a 19-year-old girl whose body became a weapon in the Cold War. Just one glance across the water, one lie told in Parliament, and an entire government collapsed into the filth. Today, on these very same sun loungers, IT millionaires and bankers are sunbathing. But do you know what they're really lying on? This scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. I'll tell you how the palace that became a home for Meghan Markle the night before her wedding was turned into the stage for Britain's greatest nightmare. But to understand this, you need to forget about the spies and go down into the very foundation of the house, to a place that still smells not of champagne, but of opium, blood, and dirty money: Cliveden. Today, the air here is thick, saturated with silence and money. It smells of freshly cut grass, chlorine from the azure pool, and a subtle note of old leather from the interiors of Bentleys gliding silently over the gravel. The long, almost kilometer-long driveway is not designed to welcome. It's designed to humble the guest, to remind them of their place even before they touch the cold bronze of the door handle. Here, they drink champagne at noon. They speak in whispers. Time flows slowly, like expensive honey. This is a world of perfect lawns and impeccably trained staff, whose faces are flawless masks. A world where the biggest problems are solved in a spa with a view of the Thames. In 2018, the night before becoming part of the royal family, the American Meghan Markle slept right here. The perfect choice. A palace built by the American dream, blessing another American dream. A glossy page in the book of history. But do they know? Those who come here for the silence and impeccable service, do they know that the echo of their footsteps on this parquet floor is drowned out by other, older sounds? Do they know on whose bones they dance? Look at this pool again. By day, it's a shining sapphire, the heart of the estate. But at night, it turns into a black mirror. The water becomes heavy, like oil, and its still surface reflects not the moon, but the past. The cold July of 1961. Here, at the water's edge, 3 people met to set the British Empire on fire: a government minister, a spy, and a 19-year-old girl whose body became a weapon in the Cold War. Lies, sex, espionage. It all started here, just a few steps from the sun loungers where bankers and IT millionaires sunbathe today. The stone here has a memory. It remembers everything. It remembers the whispers of conspirators who begged to give Europe to Hitler in exchange for their own peace. It remembers the cries of pain of thousands of soldiers who died in its halls, converted into a hospital. It remembers the arrogant laughter of the American heir who bought this piece of England to escape his own humiliation. This house is not a hotel. It's a majestic, gilded mausoleum. Every room is a crypt for someone else's secret. Every antique vase is filled not with flowers, but with the ashes of unfulfilled hopes. Legends say that ghosts wander here, but the real ghosts of Cliveden are not disembodied spirits. They are the ambitions, betrayals, and vices frozen in marble. They look at you from the portraits. They breathe down your neck in the empty corridors. How did this palace, born from an American thirst for status, become the stage for Britain's most notorious nightmare? To understand this, we need to go down, deeper than the glossy interiors, deeper than the manicured gardens, into the very foundation, to a place that still smells not of old money, but of opium, blood, and fur. To understand this house, you have to forget its English lawns, forget 5 o'clock tea and aristocratic receptions. Its story doesn't begin here. It begins thousands of miles away, in filth, chaos, and vice. The early 19th century. The ports of Canton. The air is thick, sticky, saturated with the smell of spices, filth, and the sweet, nauseating smoke of burning opium. Here, in the murky waters of the Pearl River, the first foundation stone of Cliveden was laid. The architect's name, John Jacob Astor I. He isn't interested in stone. His currency is human weakness. Officially, he is a fur trader, but the holds of his ships, like the Beaver and the Emily, are filled with more than just pelts. They carry Turkish opium to China, tons of sticky black resin. He breaks imperial laws. He spits on prohibitions. He sells addiction. This isn't business. This was the first American drug cartel. Every crate of opium, unloaded in the dark onto the Chinese shore, is an invisible brick in the wall of a future palace. Every jingle of silver, received in exchange for ruined lives and the glass-eyed stares of addicts, is a drop of gilding on its ceilings. Every carved cornice in the future mansion will be paid for by this slow death that Astor supplied wholesale. But one source of poison was not enough. Astor's empire stood on two pillars. The second one didn't swim in warm seas. It froze in the rivers of North America. Furs, blood, alcohol. His American Fur Company isn't about the romance of the frontier. It's about a ruthless monopoly built on deception. His agents went deep into the wild forests, not with a Bible, but with a barrel of cheap whiskey. They plied the native tribes with alcohol, turning proud hunters into wretched drunks, willing to trade beaver pelts worth a fortune for a bottle of firewater. This was a war of attrition, where the weapon was alcohol, and the trophy was the soft gold, stripped from the hides of slaughtered animals. Competitors weren't just pushed out, they were destroyed. Their boats were sunk, their warehouses burned. The crunch of snow under the boots of Astor's agents was the sound of an approaching predator. The snap of a steel trap was the music of his wealth. Blood on white fur, opium in Chinese pipes. What to do with this dirty money? It needs to be laundered, turned into something respectable. And Astor finds the perfect laundry. Manhattan. He buys up land, acre after acre. He doesn't build palaces. He builds slums, cramped, overcrowded human hives where several families are crammed into a single room. He is the largest landlord in New York, the architect of poverty. Every acre of English land that his grandson will one day buy will be paid for with the rent squeezed from these dark, damp boroughs. Every statue in the gardens of Cliveden will be cast from the sense that Irish immigrants paid for the right to live in rot and despair. By 1848, at the time of his death, John Jacob Astor is the richest man in America. His fortune is an unholy trinity. The poison sold to China, the blood spilled in the American forests, and the suffering cemented into the bricks of New York's slums. This is not just an inheritance. It is a curse. Money that stinks. Money that screams. And it's this scream that his grandson, William Waldorf Astor, will try to silence by buying himself an English soul made of stone and marble. This is the original sin, already poured into the foundations of Cliveden, though the house itself has not yet even been bought. Meet William Waldorf Astor, the heir, not the creator. He didn't get his hands dirty with opium and blood. He only inherited their smell, a smell that followed him through all the gilded salons of New York. He was one of the richest men in the world, but in the eyes of the old American aristocracy, he remained a merchant's grandson. His money screamed of its origins, and that scream was unbearable to him. Humiliation was the final straw. A public feud with his cousin, a petty battle for social status. And then he delivered his verdict, full of venom and arrogance. America is no place for a gentleman. This was an escape, not just a move, but a flight from the ghosts of his grandfather, from the whispers behind his back, from himself. He sailed to England as if to the promised land, where, he believed, you could buy anything, even respect, even a new soul. And in 1893, he finds a body for this soul, Cliveden. He pays $1,250,000. This isn't a real estate deal. This is an act of creation. He isn't buying a house. He's buying a stage for his new life. And he begins to build. No, he begins to make a statement. He hires Sir Charles Barry, the very same architect who resurrected the British Houses of Parliament from the ashes. The message was clear and brutal. My private home will be as majestic as the heart of your empire. You didn't accept me into your club? I will build a club that will make yours look like a pathetic shack. The wealth born in filth had to be buried under Italian marble, and Astor begins his plunder of history. He goes to Rome, and there, at the Villa Borghese, he sees it, a 17th century balustrade, a work of art, rooted in Italian soil. He doesn't admire it. He covets it. He buys it, disassembles it stone by stone, loads it onto a ship, and transports it across half of Europe. This isn't collecting. This is vandalism sanctified by money. He ripped the stone heart from the chest of Rome to transplant it into his own brick monster. Anyone who touched these railings was meant to feel not the coolness of the stone, but the weight of Astor's power, the power to buy and move history itself. But even that was not enough. He goes to France. He finds the fading Chateau d'Anières and buys its soul entirely. An entire room, a gilded Rococo salon, saturated with the spirits of French aristocrats. It too is disassembled, packed up, and inserted into the body of Cliveden, like a precious implant. Every gilded cherub on the ceiling was meant to blind the ghosts from the New York slums with its gleam. This house is not for living. It is for dominating. The corridors were designed not for people, but for echoes, so that one man's footsteps would sound like the march of an army. The walls, thick as a fortress's, but they protected not from enemies without, but from demons within. Cliveden was a shell, a gigantic stone shell, built around an immense ego and an equally immense fear. The fear that someone might one day get too close and once again catch that same scent. The scent of opium, fur, and old, dirty money. The house was built. The statement was made. A stone scream, frozen above the Thames. But inside, a perfect, dead silence reigned. A stone giant stood over the Thames, perfect, majestic, and absolutely dead. William Waldorf Astor had built himself the world's most expensive sarcophagus. He roamed its echoing halls like a ghost in his own crypt. The house had a body, but no soul. And then she appeared, Nancy Langhorne, an American from Virginia. Not an heiress of old money, but the daughter of a man who had clawed his fortune from post-war ruin. She carried within her the energy of the New World, sharp, untamable, dangerous. Having survived a scandalous divorce, she knew what public condemnation felt like, and she had learned to face it without flinching. Her marriage to Waldorf Astor, too, the builder's son, was a merger of two ambitions. He gave her limitless resources. She gave his name, life. With her arrival, the dead stone of Cliveden learned to breathe for the first time. She burst into this house like a gust of fresh, stormy wind. She threw open its heavy doors and filled its echoing corridors with laughter, arguments, and political intrigue. Cliveden was no longer a monument to one man. It became her stage, her weapon, her political theater. In 1919, she did the unthinkable. She became the first woman to take a seat in the British House of Commons, But her real power wasn't there, within the walls of Westminster. It was here, in these drawing rooms, at these dinner tables. Here, she wasn't just a member of Parliament. She was an uncrowned queen. Imagine those weekends. Cars gliding up the gravel drive. From them emerge people whose names are the history of the 20th century. There's George Bernard Shaw, his beard flowing in the wind, his tongue as sharp as a razor. There's Lawrence of Arabia, his eyes holding the secrets of the desert. And there's Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp, smiling shyly amidst lords and ladies. For Mahatma Gandhi, who visited Cliveden in '31, a goat was specially brought to the lawn so he would have fresh milk. The world came to Nancy, not she to the world. Her tongue was her greatest weapon. It struck without fail. Once, in the heat of an argument, she shot at Winston Churchill. "Winston, if I were your wife, I'd put poison in your coffee." He, without blinking, parried, "Nancy, if I were your husband, I'd drink it." It was a duel of equals, and Cliveden was their ring. But behind this glittering facade, behind the wit and champagne, lay an iron will. Nancy was a staunch supporter of prohibition. In the house where the fates of the world were decided, alcohol was strictly forbidden, to the horror of Churchill and other guests accustomed to their after-dinner brandy. This was her house, her rules. She controlled everything, from the dinner menu to the political agenda. And this control was her salvation and her curse. Cliveden became her shining stage, but also her golden cage. She ruled an empire from her drawing room, but beyond the walls of this paradise, her personal tragedies unfolded. The suicide of her son from her first marriage. The difficult relationships with her own children, who choked in the shadow of her domineering figure. The house absorbed everything, the brilliance and the pain, the triumph and the tragedy. It became a living organism, pulsating in time with her heart. She breathed a soul into it, but it was a complex, contradictory soul, woven from steel and fragility. The soul of a woman who conquered a man's world, but perhaps never conquered peace within the walls of her own palace. Cliveden's golden age didn't end. It rotted from within. The 30s were coming, and into the luxurious halls, where Charlie Chaplin's laughter had so recently echoed, the cold draft of history seeped in. The air, once scented with perfume and champagne, grew thick. In it, there was a faint smell of fear. The walls, accustomed to the witticisms of Bernard Shaw, now learned to listen to whispers. It was in these whispers that a new, poisonous name was born, the Cliveden clique. The most influential people in Britain still gathered here on weekends, lords whose ancestors had ruled the country for centuries, industrialists whose factories were the backbone of the empire, politicians who kept their fingers on the pulse of the world. They didn't gather in the great hall, but in the quiet of the library, by the fireplace, where the crackling of logs muffled their soft, measured voices. And among them, a new guest appeared more and more often, Joachim von Ribbentrop, the ambassador of Nazi Germany, tall, cold, with eyes that never smiled. He brought with him the scent of expensive cologne and steel. And they talked. They talked about Hitler, not as a monster, but as a solution, as a bulldog that could be unleashed on the Russian bear, on the threat of communism, which scared them far more than the swastika. In that cozy study, saturated with the smell of cigars and old books, they weighed the fate of Europe on apothecary scales. They decided that Czechoslovakia could be given away, that Austria could be swallowed, that peace was worth paying for with someone else's freedom. This wasn't a conspiracy of cloaks and daggers. It was something worse. It was a conspiracy of men in tuxedos, with glasses in their hands, who sincerely believed they were saving their civilization. They traded countries like stocks on an exchange, confident in their right to decide who would live and who would die. But the whispers escaped. A journalist named Claude Cockburn, in his small but venomous newspaper, The Week, gave this phenomenon a name: the Cliveden clique. 2 words that struck like a whip. 2 words that turned private conversations into treason. The accusation was made. The most powerful people in England, as guests of an American woman, were secretly colluding with the Nazis to dictate the country's foreign policy. The brand had been seared. Cliveden, a symbol of power and glamour, now became a synonym for cowardice and collaboration. Nancy Astor defended herself furiously. She screamed that she was trying to prevent a war, that her meetings were a desperate attempt to keep the peace. Perhaps she believed it, but the world was no longer listening. The name stuck. It ate into the stone, the tapestries, the very soil of the estate. For the first time, the house's immaculate reputation had a crack in it, invisible but deep. The gilding began to tarnish, and beneath it, the cold gray lead of fear and betrayal showed through. The house felt it first. It absorbed this poison, and it would never be the same. The whispering died down, but its echo settled into these walls forever. July 8th, 1961. A hot day. A thick, still heat that England only gets a few days a year. The air hung over Cliveden's lawns, heavy, like damp velvet. The evening brought no relief. It brought a sense of foreboding. By the pool, that shining sapphire Nancy Astor had built at the zenith of her fame, 3 forces met. Not people, forces. The first force, power, John Profumo, Her Majesty's Secretary of State for War, a man with an impeccable reputation, a perfect suit, and access to the nation's top secrets. He was walking by the water with his wife, the actress Valerie Hobson, the embodiment of the British establishment. Unshakable, confident, cast in bronze. The second force, vice, Christine Keeler, 19 years old, a cabaret dancer. Her body was her capital and her currency. She didn't belong to this world of lords and ladies. She was brought here, like an exotic flower, to adorn the evening. She emerged from the water, naked, droplets on her skin glistening in the setting sun. Someone had hidden her swimsuit. A cheap trick, a cheap provocation. But it worked. And the third force, invisible, espionage. Somewhere in the shadows, behind the trees, stood Yevgeny Ivanov, the naval attaché of the Soviet embassy, a spy for the main intelligence directorate. Charming, smiling, deadly. He was also Christine Keeler's lover. Power, vice, espionage. All 3 forces converged at a single point, at the edge of the water of that pool. And there was a conductor for this diabolical orchestra, Stephen Ward, an osteopath and artist, a socialite with the eyes of an old, tired fox. He lived in a small cottage on the estate grounds. He had access to high society, and he supplied that society with what it secretly craved: young girls. He wasn't just a pimp. He was a bridge between the world of power and the world of vice. And that evening, he cast his bridge across the Cliveden pool. Profumo's glance, hesitation, desire. Just 1 second. A second that would break his life, bring down the government, and drag the reputation of an entire nation through the mud. It all began here, not in secret offices, not in dark alleys, but in plain sight, under the lazy summer sky, in the shadow of walls that had seen kings and prime ministers. This house, once the center of political gravity, became the epicenter of an explosion. Profumo's lie in the House of Commons, his vow that there had been no impropriety between him and Keeler, and then the inevitable, humiliating exposure, the truth, which gushed out like filthy water from a burst dam, sweeping away everything in its path. Cliveden was no longer just a house. It became the name of a scandal. Its walls, which had absorbed the whispers about Hitler, now absorbed lust, lies, and treason. The crack that appeared in the 30s ran across the entire facade, and the marble heart of the house shattered forever. Scandal is acid. It corrodes more than just a reputation. It corrodes stone. It corrodes flesh. The explosion at the pool didn't just bring down a government. It struck at the very heart of the house, at its last guardian. Bill Astor, the son of the great Nancy, was a different sort of man. Quiet, decent, he carried his family name as both an honor and a burden. He didn't seek power. He only wanted to preserve dignity. And now, on the front pages of newspapers, the Astor name, the Cliveden name, was splattered with filth. Not just filth, with sewage, debauchery, espionage, pimping. All of this had happened on his land, under his roof. His hospitality had been exploited, his trust trampled. For Bill Astor, this wasn't just public disgrace. It was a personal betrayal. Every newspaper article was like the lash of a whip. Every whisper behind his back, a drop of poison. He watched as the name his ancestors had built for centuries became a synonym for vice. He watched as the house he loved became a pilgrimage site for gawkers and journalists searching for salacious details. This stress became a slow killer. It ate away at him from the inside, day after day. The house that should have been a sanctuary became a torture chamber, its walls no longer protected. They crushed. In 1966, Bill Astor's heart gave out. He died. The doctors called it a heart attack, but everyone who knew him understood. He died of shame. With his death, an era died too. The family could no longer bear the weight of these walls. There were too many ghosts within them, too much pain. Cliveden, once a symbol of their triumph, became a monument to their humiliation. In 1968, the Astors left, for good. They simply packed their things and abandoned the house that had been the center of their universe for nearly 75 years. The doors closed. The lights in the windows went out. The great house, gifted to the nation back in '42, was orphaned. And so, the agony began. A slow, humiliating decline. The house where kings had slept became a dormitory, its rooms filled with American students. In the halls where Churchill had argued with Nancy, rock and roll now played, and the air smelled of cheap beer. Grandeur was replaced by youth, power, by carelessness. Priceless treasures began to scatter across the world. 17th century tapestries that had witnessed the birth and death of intrigues were taken down from the walls and sold. Thousands of books in unique bindings, holding the wisdom and folly of generations, left the library. The soul of the house was put up for auction. Only an empty shell remained. A gigantic, beautiful skeleton of former greatness, needed by no one. A phantom house, wandering its own gardens, remembering the times when it was feared, loved, and hated. The times when it was still alive. What remained of William Astor's boundless ambitions, of his furious desire to carve his name in stone to silence the whispers of the past? What remained of Nancy's political power, ruling an empire from her drawing room? Stone, and a brand. In 1985, Cliveden was reborn. It became a 5-star hotel. The grand drama of history was turned into a business plan. The walls, having absorbed state secrets, learned a new language, the rustle of credit cards and polite requests to bring ice to the room. Power no longer lives here. It is rented out for £1,500 a night. You can buy the illusion of belonging to this world. You can sleep in the rooms where conspiracies were once woven and swim in the pool that drowned a government. History became a commodity, packaged in crisp sheets and silence. The scandal is now part of the spa package. The irony reaches its peak here, in the wellness center. The house, whose foundation was mixed with opium sold to millions, today offers detoxification programs. The place where political depravity poisoned an entire nation now advertises itself as an oasis of purity and spiritual balance. The original sin has not been atoned for. It has simply been monetized. Look at these tourists. They take selfies in front of the balustrade ripped from the heart of the Villa Borghese. To them, it's not a trophy bought with blood money. It's just a beautiful backdrop for an Instagram photo. They don't know what this stone cost, in money, in pride, in history. And the house doesn't care. It no longer feels a thing. Time's verdict was not destruction, but something worse: commercialization. Cliveden survived, but it paid with its soul, its great tragedies, its loud triumphs, its shame. All of it is neatly written into a promotional brochure. It is no longer a palace of power or a stage for a nightmare. It is a luxurious monument to how fleeting money, fame, and even national humiliation can be. A monument to the fact that in the end, everything, absolutely everything, can be sold. This palace, born from an attempt to launder dirty money and escape the past, became the greatest stage of the 20th century, absorbing both triumph and disgrace. But in the end, its stone heart wasn't stopped by poison and lies. It simply learned to sell its ghosts, turning its own tragedy into a luxury item. So, what is more terrifying? Walls that remember everything, or people who want to remember nothing? The history of this house is a dialogue between the past and the present, and we invite you to become a part of it. Share in the comments which of Cliveden's ghosts spoke to you the loudest. Your support, a like and a subscription, will allow us to continue descending into such gilded crypts to hear their whispers.